What's up, everyone? So today's actually going to be a double header. I'm working on a separate video, but then I came across this bit of news and I thought it'd be worth sharing and making another video on game keycards because that seems to be a very controversial topic to discuss. And it feels like every time we get somewhere, it just kind of takes a few steps back and just causes even more confusion amongst the whole Switch 2 debacle with these non-physical games that are being marketed as physical. So I'm going to try something new today. I'm actually going to get right to the point instead of blabbering on about something unrelated while I work my way there. According to a tweet by the ever-popular Wario64, according to Sega customer support, Sonic Racing CrossWorlds on the Switch 2 is a game keycard game. This is a surprise to many because there was a big assumption based off of the mock-up art that this game would actually fully be on the cartridge. But somebody went out of their way to ask Sega customer support, and customer support notified them that the game would be released on a game key card for the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, mind you, apparently this was a similar case with the game that I discussed a couple of videos ago that I will not pronounce again because I screwed it up the first time and y'all made fun of me. But apparently when they first released the box art for this game, many people also assumed that it would physically all be on the cartridge because the mock-up didn't show the game keycard jargon that comes on the bottom of the box. But then as we got closer and closer to release, and the official actual cartridge boxes started to show up, it became clearer to people that the Switch 2 version of this title would not all be on the cartridge. It would just be a game key card. In the case of Sonic CrossWorld, well, this kind of brings more confusion to the discussion. A lot of people right off the bat had been saying that they were excited to get Sonic CrossWorlds on their Switch 2 because it would be an actual fully cartridge game, and they wanted to support that to show that they would buy games that are fully on the cart. In the same way that Cyberpunk 2077 is assumed to have sold as well as it did, strictly because the game is actually on the cartridge. And so many people assume that Sega saw that they didn't have really that good of a launch when it came to games that are on a game key card, so they learned from their early mistakes and decided to put CrossWorlds on a cartridge. Now the thing is, this game is coming out on September 25th, 2025, which is just around the corner. I'm assuming there are a bunch of these cartridges already made, although realistically I have actually no idea how far ahead of time these things are manufactured. But I gotta imagine the decision of whether it was going to be a game key card or fully on cartridge was already determined well ahead of time. So while many people were seeing it as a victory and assuming that the game was now going to fully be on cartridge was a direct result of the launch of the third-party titles that weren't doing well on the game key cards, it's entirely possible that the launch numbers have nothing to do with this game because that decision was already made and finalized. I don't know. Because right now, a lot of people are just straight up assuming that Sega saw how poor the launch sales were for their games and they just decided, screw it, we're just gonna stick with it anyway. Whereas I think in reality, we are 23 days out from launch and it's way too early for them to make that kind of determination. But there is one thing from certain on the consumer side, at least the vocal fan base that's online, many people are very put off by this. It's hard to gauge exactly how many people this will actually affect because so many people opt for digital-only games. But considering third parties seldom do well on Nintendo consoles as it is, and these third-party titles already have weak sales on Nintendo consoles, especially on the physical stores, we honestly could be looking at a very dark future when it comes to the physical cartridges on the Nintendo Switch 2, specifically with third parties. This is not to say that third parties will stop supporting the Nintendo Switch 2, because like I said, I think there are enough people that go fully digital where it doesn't really matter that much to the third parties. But the part of this that could be very problematic is that in our minds, that being the customers, the buyers, the people are hoping that by not buying the game key cards, that will push the third-party publishers to decide to go for the fully on-cartridge game. But considering that the games that are fully on cartridge eat up a lot more of the upfront costs, the publishers could very likely decide that they just don't want to have a physical presence as much. The digital sales might be enough to carry the presence that they need on these devices, and they might be okay with only having a few game key cards out in the retail space just to have that physical presence. Because if the digital sales are doing well, if somebody's at the store and they see that the game's available on the game key card, and that causes them to be like, well, I don't want a game key card, I'm just going to buy it digitally instead, that might still be good enough for these publishers. they still get the retail space and they still get the game sold. This, of course, all falls back to Nintendo, however. That 64GB cartridge is just too expensive for a lot of these developers. Not that they can't afford it, but in their minds, they're like, why would I spend this much money for significantly more memory than I need for my 8GB game? And that's precisely why, reportedly on the Nintendo Switch, they had different sizes available of cartridge so that third parties could still get their games fully on the cart. Now, a lot of them still didn't. Don't get me wrong, the Switch 1 wasn't perfect in this regard. Like, you'd buy a Mega Man Legacy Collection or something, and they could fit it all onto a single cart, and it turns out that half of the game has to be downloaded on your console. And honestly, seeing how well a lot of those games still sold on the Nintendo Switch despite having extra download available is a big reason why I actually still don't think the game key cards are gonna create a massive amount of problems for the Switch 2. But still, on the Nintendo Switch 1, there was no, let's call it, get out of jail free card that these companies could use. It was a download code or a cartridge that had the game on it, or at least part of the game on it. So when somebody went to the store and they saw a case in front of them and the case had nothing but numbers, usually they're like, this is ridiculous, I'm not buying this, I wanted to get a physical game, and they can return it. The cartridge, with all of its fine print on there with a key on there, does not have that kind of benefit. And while you or I will understand what it means when we're buying a game key card, many people are not going to be aware. They're just going in to buy a Christmas gift for their nephew or whatever. They're going to be like, oh yeah, he likes Sonic. That's a Sonic game. Give it to me. Bye. Boom. Bang. Out the door. And then, you know, if said nephew does not have space in their Switch 2 for another game download, then they got to get a larger SD card. Or if the parents like their kid to have an offline Switch, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you got to download something and go to the eShop. It's just a whole extra tedious and very unnecessary step. And it could have very easily been solved by having smaller cartridges that fit smaller games on them, so that you didn't have to sit there and be like, well, either I can pay $1 for the game key card to sell my game on there, or $15 on the cartridge. Those aren't the actual numbers, but those are the rumors that fly around. Whereas if they had like an 8, 16, 32, those would be priced accordingly. At least that way, at minimum, you could guarantee that even if a game was a little bit larger than 8GB and somebody wanted to be cheap, they would have a majority of the game on the cartridge instead of forcing nothing on the cartridge. But no, instead, you gave them a way out to just throw everything on a plastic shell. Now, the problem is on our end, it's not very transparent. Again, our end, we the customers, the people. Anytime a third-party game is going to be announced for the Switch 2, there's just going to be that dark cloud of confusion over the title until we get a confirmation. Because even right now, let's say that the Sega customer support is actually incorrect and the game is fully on cartridge, and they clarify that over the next week or two. Well, the fact that the discourse has bounced around this much already is kind of absurd. Like, you shouldn't have to wonder if this physical game is going to be an actual physical game or not. And the companies, they're not gonna tell you in the trailer because it's gonna immediately shut down any chance of somebody potentially pre-ordering. So it just creates a whole controversy for everybody. And you might argue that this is Nintendo giving third-party developers a chance to use something cheaper in order to get the retail presence. But no, this is actually completely against the customers that want physical games because they are physical. There are going to be a handful of people who are going to be like, well, this is good because I can buy the game and then sell it back. But it's a third-party title. How much do you think it's going to be worth? It's going to drop half the price within a span of a few months. And that price is going to be for a new copy. So your copy is going to be worth even less than that. Unless, like, you're a collector who just likes to have all of the cartridges lined up in front of them. But again, the point is that it's such a specific type of person that's going to benefit from the game key cards and actually defend the game key cards that it's guaranteed to not be the overwhelming majority of people that actually want to buy physical third-party titles on the Nintendo Switch 2. And I mean, there's only like 40 people out there that actually want third-party titles on the Nintendo Switch 2 because everybody just wants to buy the first-party games. Let's be real. But still, this whole game key card thing is such a nuisance. And it's such a controversial decision. And the decision is not in the third party's hand. The decision is in Nintendo's hands to even allow this to go into their console. Like, I would say in all of the terrible, asinine decisions that I have seen from Nintendo since the launch of the Switch 2 until now, since the reveal of the Switch 2 rather, number one would have to be anything related to prices, whether that's for the upgrade packs, welcome tour, the console, Mario Kart, etc. Anything that involves price, I think, is the worst decision they made. And the second worst decision has to be the game key card. And I think a Nintendo that is more proud of what's being delivered on their console, more proud and more controlling of their roots, and not just money hungry looking for a quick, greedy cash grab, would have made sure they focused on the type of quality that people expect from their consoles, and ensured that third-party developers had an appropriate amount of cartridge space where they could still invest their games into the Switch 2. Right, they're coming off the Nintendo Switch. They are more arrogant and more cocky than they've ever been in probably my lifetime. The closest second would be the 3DS, with how confident they were that they were going to succeed right off the bat with that one. But with the Switch 2, they expect everybody is going to want to buy it, right? So they should expect that third parties are going to want to pay the money to put their game on their cartridges. They shouldn't have to offer the game keycard in order to create some kind of favor with the third parties in order that they continue to support the Switch 2. Because the way I see it, if you are confident enough to charge people $450 for the Nintendo Switch 2 because you assume that everybody is willing to go out there and make sure they buy that console, then you absolutely should be confident enough in the third parties supporting the Switch 2 in order to get the games out to the people that you're trying to sell to. So I don't buy into this idea that they made the game keycards in order to ensure that they have third-party support. I think that comes hand in hand with how confident they are with the Switch 2. Because I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but yesterday after the annual shareholders meeting, he was actually asked about the game keycards, he being Shintaro Furukawa. One of the shareholders actually voiced their concern, citing that they always hear that the third-party games do not sell well on the Nintendo platform, and referring to the game keycards reportedly as half-baked measures with little appeal, and noting that many third-party publishers decided to use the game keycards, and asking if Shintaro Furukawa thinks that the game keycards has anything to do with the poor sales of the third-party game. And Furukawa's response was explaining how the game keycards work, and citing that the reason why they could use the game keycards on the Nintendo Switch 2 is because of how large the internal storage of the Nintendo Switch 2 is. And he did not remotely answer the question about how game keycards could potentially be affecting third-party game sales on the Nintendo Switch 2. Which, of course, he didn't. What's he gonna say? Be like, yeah, our third-party sales suck because of the game keycards. But no, I actually don't even think that, as I've been trying to push, and even this shareholder, who is anonymous, shares my entire opinion. They say that they always hear about third-party games not selling well on Nintendo platforms. This has been my whole point. Game keycard or not, they are not going to do well on the Nintendo Switch 2. This is not the console you buy to play third-party games. I don't care how strong you think this thing is. That's not what people are buying the Switch 2 for. But the issue is, now that they got the Switch 2 where it is, for those small subset of fans that actually do go out of their way to play third parties on the Switch 2, and the even smaller subset within that subset that is all about buying strictly physical third-party titles, amongst them is going to be the confusion with the game key card. And I think we're seeing that confusion happen right in front of our eyes, just with how much back and forth we've had on the discussion of Sonic CrossWorlds. Now, mind you, I am very excited about Sonic CrossWorlds, and even if I did have a Nintendo Switch 2, that's not where I would be buying the game on. Even if I didn't buy this PC and it was just my Switch 1 and my Series X like it's been for the past few years, CrossWorlds would have clearly been a Series X title, the same way that Sonic and Shadow Generations was. Sonic Frontiers. By the way, if you guys didn't realize it, I'm a major Sonic fan. I know a lot of you guys would know that if you've been around the channel long enough. I have a whole retrospective series in my playlist if you're interested. So Sonic CrossWorlds actually means a lot to me. And despite that, as a guy who made his channel based off of Nintendo, even if I had a Nintendo Switch 2, I wouldn't be buying Sonic CrossWorlds on my Switch 2, in the same way that I didn't buy any of the Sonic games on my Switch 1. Because objectively, there are better ways to play third-party titles than on a Switch. That's how it's always been, and that's how it's going to be moving forward. And don't tell me you're doing it because it's handheld so it makes it worth it, because you get like an hour and a half of battery life. So, not really. Just plug it into your TV so you can get the 4K output. Anyway, I think that's enough for now. I got another video coming out in a bit, and it might excite some of you. I'm going to have a fun little discussion on the difference between a bricked console and a banned console. And I'm going to show you guys my banned Nintendo Switch 1. So who knows, my channel might get entirely shut down after that video. Probably not, because I'm going to play it very safe. But we'll see. Either way, thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.